We live in an age of absolute technological wizardry. With a single tap, we can get a 5-day forecast, track storms with satellite precision, and have hourly updates pushed right to our phones. We have supercomputers running models so complex they make your head spin, predicting the weather with a detail our great-grandparents couldn't have even dreamed of. And yet, how many times has that 0% chance of rain washed out your perfectly planned picnic? How often has a light dusting of snow turned into a paralyzing blizzard? We have more data than ever before, but the weather still finds ways to outsmart us. It holds a primal power, a wild unpredictability that can throw a wrench in our plans in a heartbeat. But what if the best weather predictors weren't digital at all? What if they weren't even instruments? 1,000, 2,000 years ago, across continents and cultures, ancient civilizations could read the sky, the sea, and the land with an uncanny accuracy that feels almost supernatural. They knew when to plant and when to harvest. They knew when it was safe to sail and when to batten down the hatches. And they knew all this not because of some lost technology, but because they were listening to the world in a way we've almost completely stopped. They saw subtle signs, patterns, and shifts in the environment that we've mostly forgotten how to see. These are the lost weather skills of the ancient world, a forgotten science of observation that was, for millennia, the key to human survival. Imagine you're a farmer in the Nile Valley, 4,000 years ago. Your life, your family, your entire civilization depends on the great river's annual flood. Too little water means your crops will turn to dust, bringing famine. Too much, and the flood will sweep away your home. You don't have an app to warn you. There are no government alerts. There is only the sky. And in that sky, you and your priests are watching night after night for one specific star to return. Its appearance is the trigger, the divine signal that the life-giving waters are on their way. This isn't astrology like we think of it today. This was a celestial clock, a cosmic calendar that held the fate of an entire kingdom. These ancient observers didn't have satellites, but they had a powerful set of predictive tools, sharpened over countless generations. Today, we're going to uncover 5 of these secret weather skills they used to master their environment. And these aren't just historical fun facts. They're a testament to a different kind of intelligence, a deep, holistic understanding of our planet that we're only now starting to appreciate all over again. The celestial clock, the stars and the sun. Long before calendars, and definitely before clocks, the sky was humanity's timekeeper. The rhythmic dance of the sun, moon, and stars wasn't just pretty to look at. It was a user manual for the planet. It told our ancestors when seasons were changing, when animals would migrate, and most importantly, when the weather was about to shift in big, predictable ways. This was the foundation of what you could call astrometeorology, the original weather science. The most dramatic example comes from the very civilization we just pictured, ancient Egypt. Their entire world was tied to the rhythm of the Nile River. The annual flood, which they called the Akhet, was everything. The Egyptians noticed that this flood always arrived shortly after a specific celestial event, the heliacal rising of the star Sirius. This is the moment when Sirius, the brightest star in the sky, first becomes visible on the horizon just before sunrise, after being hidden by the sun's glare for about 70 days. Priests would watch the skies with religious focus, and when Sirius reappeared, they knew the flood was just weeks away. This single observation let them prepare their fields, manage their food stores, and align their entire lives with the cosmos. It was so reliable they built their entire calendar and their survival around it. But the Egyptians weren't the only ones. Half a world away, the Mayan civilization developed one of the most complex and accurate calendars ever, all through naked eye observation. They tracked the cycles of the sun, the moon, and even Venus with stunning precision. And this wasn't just for ceremony. Their calendars were directly linked to seasonal weather, telling them the best times to plant and harvest their maize. Meanwhile, in Mesopotamia, the Babylonians were meticulously recording everything they saw in the sky on clay tablets. They believed that the movements of the planets, which they saw as gods, directly influenced events on Earth, including the weather. They created the zodiac to better track these movements, and they combined these celestial observations with notes on things like cloud formations and wind patterns. We might just call it astrology now, but it was really the world's first large-scale attempt to find patterns and connect the dots between the heavens and the weather on the ground. They were building a database, one clay tablet at a time, trying to find order in the chaos. The language of the sky: clouds, colors, and halos. While the stars offered the long-term forecast, the sky itself gave you the daily weather report. Ancient peoples, from Greek sailors to Chinese farmers, learned to read the language written in the clouds, the wind, and the light. They were masters of short-term forecasting, picking up on signs that are still right there above us if we just know what to look for. Maybe the most famous piece of weather lore, one that has survived for thousands of years, is the old sailor's saying, "Red sky at night, sailor's delight. Red sky at morning, sailor's warning." This isn't just an old wives' tale. It's a remarkably solid piece of science, especially in the mid-latitudes, where weather systems tend to move from west to east. Think of a Greek mariner on the Aegean. As the sun sets in the west, its light has to travel through more atmosphere to reach him. If the sky to the west, where tomorrow's weather is coming from, is clear, then dust particles in the air scatter the blue and green light, leaving only the fiery reds and oranges to paint the clouds. So, a red sunset usually meant high pressure and stable. Fair weather were heading his way. But if that same sailor woke up to a blazing red sunrise in the east, that told a very different story. It meant the clear, high-pressure system had already passed by, and that red light was now illuminating the moisture-filled, unstable air of a storm system approaching from the west. For him, a red morning was a clear signal to be on guard for rough seas. The sky offered more than just color, though. Halos, the faint rings of light that can form around the sun or moon, were another universal sign of change. These halos are created by light refracting through tiny ice crystals in high-altitude cirrus clouds. These wispy, mare's tail clouds are often the very first sign of an approaching warm front, which usually brings rain or snow within 24 to 48 hours. Across countless cultures, a ring around the moon meant it was time to prepare for wet weather. It was nature's push notification, written in a language of light and ice. And of course they watched the shapes of clouds. Low, thick, dark clouds obviously meant rain, but they knew the subtleties. Wispy, feathery cirrus clouds hinted at a change on the way, while puffy cumulus clouds in a bright blue sky meant the good weather was going to stick around. The Greek philosopher Aristotle even tried to create a formal system for this in his work Meteorologica, documenting cloud patterns and what they meant. While a lot of his conclusions were flawed, his work was a huge leap forward, an attempt to move from pure lore to a systematic study of the atmosphere. For almost 2,000 years, his writings were the authority on weather. These people didn't need a barometer to know a pressure system was moving in. They could see it painted across the entire sky. We've seen how the ancients read the stars and the sky, but they also looked down and all around them, at the creatures closest to the ground. They knew that animals were living, breathing barometers, tuned into the environment in ways we can barely imagine. Before we dive into how our ancestors used the animal kingdom as a massive early warning system, take a moment to subscribe and hit that bell icon. We put out new videos every week exploring the kind of lost knowledge that could change the way you see the world. The Animal Oracle, nature's early warning system. To ancient people, the world wasn't a bunch of separate things. It was a living, connected system. They understood that other creatures shared their world and were way more sensitive to its subtle shifts. Animals, they noticed, could sense changes in air pressure, humidity, and temperature long before any human could. Their behavior became a vital and often life-saving forecast. You can find this wisdom in almost every ancient culture on Earth. A Roman farmer might have noticed his bees, usually busy among the flowers, had all disappeared back into their hive. He knew this meant rain was coming. Bees' delicate wings don't do well in the rain, and they can sense the rising humidity, so they instinctively head for shelter before a storm hits. In the same way, if you saw ants frantically building up the dirt mounds around their nests, it was a good sign that heavy rain was on the way, a desperate effort to protect their colony from a flood. Bird behavior was one of the most trusted indicators. Birds are incredibly sensitive to drops in barometric pressure that signal an approaching storm, likely thanks to a mechanism in their ears that can detect these slight atmospheric changes. When you see birds flying low to the ground, it's often because the lower, denser air is easier on them during a pressure drop. A sudden eerie silence when the usual bird song just stops was another powerful sign of an incoming storm. On the flip side, birds singing happily during a light drizzle was a good sign that the weather would clear up soon. Even our own pets carry this ancient sensitivity. Folklore is full of stories about cats and dogs acting weird before a storm. Cats getting grumpy or hiding, dogs whining or getting extra clingy. These behaviors are often tied to their ability to sense changes in air pressure or even the faint smell of ozone from distant lightning. For our ancestors, a restless cat wasn't just being moody, it was a walking, purring weather station. Modern science can now explain a lot of this, the sensitivity to air pressure, humidity, and infrasound, but that just proves how sharp the observational skills of ancient peoples really were. They didn't need to know why the bees went back to the hive. They just knew it meant it was time to get the harvest in before the rain. They were in a constant conversation with the natural world, and the animals were their most reliable oracles. The whispers of the wind and the wisdom of smoke. The air itself was packed with information. The invisible currents of the wind carried messages about coming weather, and even something as simple as smoke from a fire could tell you a story. For any culture near the sea, understanding the wind wasn't just a skill, it was the difference between a successful voyage and total disaster. The ancient Greeks even gave the winds names and personalities, calling them the anemoi, or wind gods. Boreas was the harsh, cold north wind of winter. Zephyrus was the gentle west wind of spring, and Notus was the stormy south wind. This wasn't just mythology. It was a clever way to remember the distinct character and weather that came with each wind direction. A sailor knew that a shift to the south wind, Notus, could bring dangerous squalls. This knowledge was woven into their culture in stories like Homer's Odyssey. This intense focus on the wind was shared by all great maritime peoples, like the Vikings. Their amazing ability to navigate the brutal North Atlantic came down to their mastery of reading the wind and the waves. They knew that a steady wind from one direction would create a predictable pattern of swells on the ocean's surface. Even if the sky was completely overcast and they couldn't see the sun, a seasoned navigator could feel the direction of that deep swell and use it to stay on course. They were literally reading the texture of the ocean. But you didn't have to be at sea to read the air. One of the most elegant and simple tricks for short-term prediction was available to anyone with a fire. The way smoke behaves is a direct indicator of air pressure. Picture an elder in a Native American tribe watching the smoke from the central lodge fire. If the smoke rises straight up, high into the sky, it's a clear sign of a high-pressure system. High pressure means the air is dense and stable, which keeps the smoke in a tight column and points to fair weather ahead. But if the smoke hangs low, swirling and drifting just above the ground, it's a dead giveaway that a low-pressure system is moving in. The air in a low-pressure system is less dense and offers less resistance, so the smoke just can't rise. This low-hanging smoke often smelled stronger too because the particles weren't scattering. This was a reliable sign that humidity was high and rain or snow was on its way. It was an immediate hyper-local forecast, a piece of folk science as brilliant as it was simple. The masterclass of observation, Las Cabañuelas. So we've seen how ancient people read the stars, the sky, the animals, and the wind. But what if you could roll all of that into one complex system to forecast the weather for an entire year? In Spain and parts of Latin America, a tradition known as Las Cabañuelas does exactly that. It's a masterclass in holistic, long-term observation. The method is a fascinating system of calendar-based weather prediction. The most common version uses the first month of the year. Imagine a farmer, a cabañuelista, in a small village. On January 1st, he's not celebrating. He is observing. He meticulously records everything about that single day's weather. The wind, the clouds, the humidity, the birds, the dew on the grass. He believes that the weather on January 1st predicts the weather for the entire month of January. On January 2nd, he does it all again, and that day's weather predicts February. He keeps this up for the first 12 days of the year, with each day corresponding to a month. But it gets better. The system has a built-in fact-checker. The days from January 13th to January 24th are called the ritorno, or the return. The weather on the 13th predicts the weather for December. The 14th predicts November, and so on, going backward. This gives the observer 2 data points for each month. To get the forecast for July, for instance, he'd average his notes from January 7th and January 18th. And for the true diehards, it gets even more detailed. The last days of January can be used for fine-tuning, with some traditions breaking down the final days and even hours to correspond to different months, adding more and more layers to the forecast. This system is the polar opposite of modern meteorology. It's deeply personal, hyper-local, and requires incredible patience and a lifetime of knowledge. It's built on the belief that nature works in cycles and patterns, and if you pay incredibly close attention at just the right time, you can unlock the secrets of the whole year. And while modern science would question its accuracy, Las Cabañuelas isn't really about being right or wrong. It's a cultural practice that forces you to have a profound, intimate connection with your environment. It makes the practitioner notice everything, to be totally present, and to see the deep rhythms connecting the dew on a leaf in January to the thunderstorms of August. So we've gone from the stargazers of Egypt to the cloud readers of Greece. We've listened to the warnings of bees and birds, felt the meaning of the wind, and seen the incredible dedication of the cabañuelistas. It's easy to look back on all this as primitive folklore, replaced by the superior knowledge of modern science. But that misses the point entirely. Sure, these civilizations didn't have our technology, but they had something we, in our climate-controlled homes with our eyes glued to screens, have almost completely lost: a deep, intimate, and unbroken connection to the natural world. Their survival depended on their ability to pay attention. They noticed the tiny shift in the wind, the unusual quiet of the birds, the faint ring around the moon. They were in a constant dialogue with their environment, reading its language in every sunrise and every falling leaf. Their knowledge was holistic, blending what we now call astronomy, biology, and physics into a single, unified way of understanding their world. The legacy of this ancient wisdom is still with us, hiding in farmers' almanacs and in the old sayings our grandparents still use. It's a powerful reminder that there's more than one way of knowing the world. Our satellites and supercomputers are amazing tools, but they can also make us passive consumers of information instead of active observers. Maybe the greatest secret of our ancestors wasn't a trick for predicting rain. Maybe their greatest skill was the ability to be truly present, to observe with patience, and to listen to the planet with humility and respect. In our modern world, buzzing with notifications and distractions, maybe that is the most valuable and the most profoundly lost survival skill of all. What ancient skills or pieces of weather lore do you know about? Let us know in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this journey into the lost science of our ancestors, don't forget to like this video and subscribe for more explorations of forgotten wisdom. Thanks for watching.